Jewelers of Reddit. How often do people tearfully return engagement rings? I used to work in a pawn shop during the summers between college. I would say that once a week would get someone coming in to sell engagement rings that were turned down. It was always sad because my boss knew that he could get them for a cheaper price because the people just wanted to get rid of the rings. The poor souls would usually leave with around half the money the ring was worth just to move on. To be fair, if it was pawned, they would be able to sell it and only give you a $20. I sold jewelry years ago as a second job. One guy will always come to mind. He was young, very shy, and only after seeing him a couple of times and becoming friendly did I find out that he had traumatic brain injury. He would come into the store once a week and look at the rings. When he finally settled on one, we put it on layaway, and he would still come by to look at it each week. I came to really like him. He was a good and decent man. We counted the days together. Each week, we counted down to his big night. The day he came and picked up the ring, I remember putting it in the fanciest box we had. I wished him well and off he went. When I didn't see him the following week, I just smiled, knowing he was happy. About a month later, he came back carrying the little bag. He said, "Can I give it back, Charlie?" I asked him what happened and he told me that she said no. I didn't ask any more questions. I would have done anything to fix him at that moment, but I knew that there wasn't anything I could do or say to make him feel better. So I just told him that I was sorry and I rang up his return. As he was leaving, I said, "She has no idea what she's missing." I never saw him again. I've been in this business for over 10 years, and I've sold enough engagement rings that I really have no idea how many are out there at this point. Sooner or later, this is bound to happen. I've had it happen a few times. Here's the worst story. A couple comes in together. Let's call them Mike and Stephanie. Mike is ready to spend about $20K, which is a lot of money for a young couple, and I'm showing them rings in that range. But Stephanie keeps pushing for more, and more, and more. Finally, with enough begging, pleading, smiles, and thinly veiled sexual promises, she talks him into a 3-carat center diamond, with an elaborate setting, for around $30K. Honestly, I don't feel great about having to witness this whole exchange, but at the end of the day, it's none of my business, so I complete the transaction. About 3 weeks later, Stephanie comes to my office alone. I assume she needs the ring resized or something, but instead she asks me if I can remove the center diamond and replace it with a CZ cubic zirconia, a very cheap diamond substitute. I'm surprised, so I stammer sure. "But why? Are you traveling or something and don't want to risk the stone?" She responds that it's nothing like that. She just prefers to have the CZ in there for now. Obviously, every red flag in existence is waving in front of my eyes at this point, so I say okay, take her ring, and tell her she can come back in a day or two to pick it up with the CZ in it. But as soon as she's out the door, I'm dialing Mike. After all, he's the one who wrote me a $30K check, so he's my customer, not her. Mike picks up, and after a moment of small talk, I ask him if he knows what Stephanie is up to. "No" is the shocked response. Mike called me back the next day and told me that apparently Stephanie was planning to call off the engagement and return the ring, but keep the 3-carat diamond. He was obviously very upset, and asked me if I could give him a refund. I offered my sympathy, and gave him back his money. Needless to say, he was very grateful that I had called him. About 2 years later, Mike came back with another woman who I liked much better. They're happily married with 2 kids now. Mike and I have become friends, and he's probably referred me 10 plus other customers over the years. As for Stephanie, after she left my office that day, I never saw her again. Back when I worked at a pawn shop, there was this guy that came in all the time to buy jewelry for his live-in girlfriend. He worked on offshore rigs, and when he got home, he'd pick up something small and nice for his GF to show her he missed her. Well, one day he came in wanting a ring. Said he felt it was finally time. Awesome. We pick out this great ring that he knows she'll love, and off he goes. Says he's going to surprise her with it that night. That night, I'm still at work. He comes in looking pee. Apparently this time he came in after he told her he was heading back to the rig and he'd see her in a few weeks. He got the ring, then went back to the house to surprise her with the proposal and tell her he had a few weeks off instead. He walked in on her and one of his best friend going at it. Not even an hour after he had left, he asked if he could return it. I said yes. He asked if he could spend the cash right then. I said yes. He asked if he could look at our shotguns. I said no. I didn't want any part of that. He left. Never saw him again. I work odd days here and there in a jewelry shop. Because I'm not full-time and only do the odd day, I don't often get to see the outcomes. However, there was one fairly amusing time that I did. The guy was young, late teens or maybe early 20s, and looked like a typical chav type. He went on and on about how much he loved his girlfriend, and how he wanted the perfect ring for her. I showed him a few, and each time he asked if we had anything cheaper. Finally, he settled on a £50 silver and cubic zirconia dress ring. Now, I'm not saying price should matter that much when it comes to engagement rings, but this was ridiculous, and the ring even looked cheap and tacky. Anyway, off the guy went, only to return literally a few hours later to return the ring because she'd, and surprisingly, said no. He brushed it off, made comments about her being a B and such. Then he topped it all off by trying to hit on me. I would give anything to be that ignorant. I worked at a jewelry store in a mall close to my community college, and while my time there was short, I have experienced someone returning a ring. It was the week of Mother's Day and he was the first person I was able to sell diamonds to since I had finished my diamond certification course, or whatever it's called. Anyway, he told my boss and I he wanted to propose to his girlfriend who also happens to be the mother of his 2 or 3-year-old son. He picked out the diamond that was a specialty diamond to the store, like Kay's has the Leo diamond. My store had their own. After he purchased it I hadn't seen him for about a month, when he walked into the store asking to speak to my boss. After about 10 minutes and a sorrowful shoulder grab my boss started the return. Come to find out, his fiancée had said yes, but then I guess guilt started to settle in cause she wasn't sure if her sob was his. Worst part about it all is he helped raise the child from day one and involved him in the proposal. I work at a pawn shop and people sell the rings all the time, especially men. This is because they either can't return it or are too embarrassed to go back. There have been women who sell it, but that is usually after a divorce. I sold jewelry for almost a year at a retail store and frequently we'd have young men come in, sometimes really drunk, to buy engagement rings for their girlfriends and they'd come back in a few days to return it. Personally, I guess because of my age and that I'm a woman, these men felt like I needed to hear about their bitchy girlfriends and how they tried to mend their relationships with an engagement. Mend their relationships with an engagement. That says it all right there. Not a jeweler, but from the guy's point of view, went shopping for a ring, found a great one, picked it out, was going to pick it up after work on Monday. Halfway through Monday, I get laid off and have to return the ring so I can use the money to move across the country. The jewelers were super nice about it and gave me my deposit back and everything, and called occasionally wishing me luck in finding a new job. Sucked big time. I'm late, but I used to work at Zales. Every 6 months you had to bring jewelry in to be inspected and cleaned to keep the warranty valid. I had seen a guy come in a couple times. He was super quiet and always looked pissy, so I decided to try to talk to him. I said, "Wow, she really takes good care of it, the ring. It's always so clean." He responded, "It's never been freaking worn." According to the paperwork, he had owned the ring for about 2 years. Poor guy. I quietly finished up, handed it back and walked away. I never made eye contact with him after that. I worked at a pawn shop owned by a friend's relatives for a short time, and the thing that comes to mind when I read this thread is the time I probably ruined a relationship. A lady came in one day with a ring. She asked if we could appraise, saying he said he spent $5,000 on it. I want to check to make sure. I thought it was funny, so I took the ring in the back, checked the gold, fake, checked the diamonds, all fake. Head back to the lady and hand it to her, saying it's definitely not $5k, more like costume jewelry. Needless to say, she was stormed out of the store yelling, "I'm gonna kill that mother." I chuckled and went about my day. After a long relationship finally ended, I gathered up all the jewelry he bought me over the years and tried to sell it. I was in college at the time and really needed the money. Turned out the super nice expensive stuff was all crap, nearly worth a textbook. I worked at a jewelry store for 2 years. I'd say 1 out of every 15 rings we sold would be returned. I actually got pretty good at picking out the couples whose relationship wouldn't make it to the wedding. It's the little things that indicate couples are in love, holding hands, smiling, showing each other respect. The couples that were snippy at each other usually didn't make it. This has scientific backing. Actually, there's some ratio of positive interactions to negative ones that predicts whether a relationship will be successful. My brother-in-law is a jeweler. He told me that he can always tell when someone is going to return the ring. If the man and the woman are way off on how much to spend, it's over. In his experience, it's mostly the women who want to spend over 10 grand. When the guy wants to spend a few hundred and the woman wants to get a second mortgage, it's over. The other one is when the woman is buying the ring instead of the man. He says he sees it often and they used to take bets on when she would be coming back to try and return the ring. They don't do that anymore because most of the time the woman came back within a few months to return it. I have a friend who broke off the engagement and kept her ring anyway, convincing herself that she was owed it. Seriously fricked up. It's better to return a ring than to give it to your next girlfriend. Don't do this, please. My ex, who was obsessed with the idea of me, not the real me, decided to propose and bought a Cartier engagement ring. I overheard him talking to his mother. He still lived at home at 35 and she still ironed his underpants. After a few serious alarm bells, I finally got the courage to leave him before he got the chance to propose. Anyway, he was upset about this breakup and started frequenting my uni library, among other stalker stuff. He saw a girl who has my hair color and style and starts to chat to her. Turns out her name is also Naynots. They start dating and he turns her into a mini Naynots, taking her to our holiday places and posing her in identical poses. They buy a dog the same breed as mine. He hated animals and was allergic, and calls it the same name as my dog. He proposes and gives her the ring he chose for me. A year after our breakup he bumps into me, and was so proud to tell me their story. Yuck yuck yuck. Return the darn ring and get the poor girl her own. Dang. That's a Lifetime original movie right there. I only worked in jewelry for about a year and a half and it only happened once, but I had known the guy for about 12 years, putting us both in our mid-20s. He had a ring on layaway for about 3 months making payments, came in Christmas Eve to make the final payment and left the happiest man alive. Came back Boxing Day and I said, hey, how did it go, thinking he was in to get it ray-sized to fit her finger. I figured it out when he wouldn't even look me in the eye and walked right past me so a co-worker would help him instead. She was his daughter's mother and instead of spending the rest of their lives together, she broke up with him on Christmas when he proposed. As much as I would live to say what a B, I can't help but think the child and the parents would be happier in the long term not forcing a relationship. Just wanted to say I knew a guy who proposed to his girlfriend, and she said yes, but hated the ring. Hated it. They went back to the jewelers together and exchanged it for one she liked. I assume that jewelers see a lot of couples like this who just exchange it or need it resized or whatever. Not a jeweler or an employee of a jewelry store, but the unfortunate chump that had to wind up returning an engagement ring. After moving across Canada to chase who I thought was going to be my wife, I found out she was cheating on me. Roughly 6 months earlier I had spent what savings I had buying the engagement ring that she wanted from a rather well-known chain jewelry store in Canada. Well, to make a long story short, they wouldn't take it back. As much as I fought with them, they pretty much told me I was SOL. I wound up selling it privately and losing roughly $5k in the deal. Still freaking bitter. I had to return my engagement ring. We were young and dumb and thought we were making mad bank. A stupid expensive ring? Sure, we have 12 months to pay it off. 2 weeks after we bought it, he gets laid off. We returned the ring and used the money for the down payment to move across the country. 3 years later I have a new ring. It isn't cheap, but something we could definitely afford. Is your so a Redditor? Cause I'm pretty sure someone made that same post from the other perspective farther up. Not a jeweler, but I did return an engagement ring. The ex-fiancée and I had broken up for good in December of 2005 and I had held onto the ring because I was an idiot. There's still a chance, man. The following St. Patrick's Day I decided to pawn the ring to get some booze money to go to a party with this girl I had been seeing since the middle of February. Pawn store clerk hands me a receipt with the invoice number and he notices that the last 3 numbers were 666. I thought that was pretty fitting. Best part is that the girl I was getting booze money for became my wife 3 years later. I now have a beautiful daughter. The ironing is delicious. I don't know whether he was tearful, but I did chuckle when I noticed an exchange on our sales report that was a fancy expensive wedding set that was traded for a nice gold Rolex. He probably came out ahead there. I used to sell expensive watches at a jeweler's. In my 5 years I have had 3 customers who exchanged engagement rings for watches. It's much better choice in my opinion. I worked in jewelry not too long ago. It wasn't an engagement ring per se, but a woman had gone and bought a wedding band for her husband. She came back about a week later and was returning it. Usually men's rings are hard to size correctly, so I asked if it didn't fit. She responded with no. He cheated on me. I didn't know how to react, so I just kind of said I'm sorry and did the return. Needless to say, she never came back. I worked in a jewelry store not too long ago. Since most of the people who came in to buy engagement rings were couples who planned on getting married, we never had many returns. But you would be surprised at how many people get their engagement rings and wedding rings stolen. I'll never forget this woman that came in. She was in her late 50s it looked like, and she had a 1970s design on her wedding ring that isn't made anymore. She spent what felt like forever trying to find a diamond ring to match her wedding band, but to no avail. She came up to me with the most painful look on her face and my heart broke for her as she told me her story. Since we did engraving and similar things on site, I told her we could help her do the design on whatever ring she liked. She just had to leave her wedding band at the store. She was very reluctant, but finally decided to do it. I was part-time, and I haven't seen her since, but I like to think that she was happy with her ring and the person that stole it got sent to jail. That's a lovely story. I have a very old-fashioned 70s pattern on my wedding ring, because I always loved my mum's ring so much. I think my husband must have gone with his mother to choose my engagement ring. I'll have to ask him. Former jeweler here. One guy comes to mind, although there were no tears involved. He was in a few times and picked up his half-carat solitaire. He put a lot of thought into it, was quite excited. Fast forward a couple days later, he quietly comes into the store to return it. We asked if there was anything wrong with it. He said number. She turned knee down because it wasn't big enough. At least I know now. So heartbreaking. I dunno, but the gal I proposed to said she threw the engagement ring into a lake in a drunken fit. I probably dodged a bullet there, but $2,000 down the drain really hurt. Yep, she kept sold it. Good riddance. Recently started working at a jewelry store, and it's amazing how many people come in with big retail jewelry store products to sell to us, and listening to how much they paid for something that we could have saved them thousands makes me sick for them. Anyways, had a fella buy his girlfriend an engagement ring from K Jeweler, spent about $2,000 on it 4 months prior. It came time to propose, she says yes, but it was gold not white gold, and she didn't like the cut of the diamond, so she wanted him to pick out a new one. Obviously, with it being 4 months ago, he couldn't return it and decided to see what he could get by selling it to us. The diamond's clarity wasn't good and he ended up selling it to us for $400 to use for melt. I felt really bad, but he didn't seem to be fazed by the scenario. Not a jeweler, but I did return my engagement ring. I was not embarrassed at all. I was honest about what happened. My ex was a pose who said he loved me, was so glad to be spending the rest of his life with me one night, and dumped me for another girl the next afternoon. The jeweler felt bad and was also honest. I was better off selling it privately. The jewelry store wasn't going to give me much. Pawn shops were laughable, but luckily I sold it on Craigslist for a good amount. Sometimes I wonder how it went for the guy who bought it off of me. Hopefully a lot better than it did for me. I did the same thing and I don't feel even a little bad about it. When I was 22, I was just getting my career started and I didn't have a lot of money. I was dating this girl and I thought I wanted to marry her, but since I didn't have a lot of money, I bought her a promise ring that was only a few $100s. Between the time that it had to be sized and us picking it up, I found out she was cheating on me. Ended up cancelling the purchase and buying myself a ring to remind myself to be smarter about my decisions with future girlfriends, and have been single ever since. In high school I used to work at the establishment for fine jewelry, Sears. We had like 3 nice engagement rings that all ran over $1,000 and were never on sale. A guy came in this time of year, looked at one, slept on it, and purchased it the next day. A couple weeks later he came back looking to return the ring. I asked him if there was anything wrong with the ring. He said, no. She opened it and she loved it. Then she found out it was from Sears and she didn't want it anymore. A couple days later we ended our engagement. Felt bad for the guy, but he might have dodged a bullet. My boyfriend proposed to me a couple months ago, around our 3rd anniversary. When I saw the ring, it was from the Cartier Trinity series and I was so stoked. Frick yes. Unfortunately the ring didn't fit. He instantly told me to put it back in the box and not to touch it, that it's easier to exchange a ring than have it resized. So a few weeks later we go down to Tokyo Isetan and Shinjuku to exchange the ring. First of all, I'm a terrible gay dude and I hate shopping. But that aside, Tokyo Isetan is easily one of the most breathtakingly beautiful places I've ever seen. The whole floor was in Art Deco, chrome and mirrors, Dior, Carolina Herrera, Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Michael Kors. It was all women's clothing and nothing there was less than $10,000. I saw one dress for $50,000 and a few necklaces for upwards of $200,000. It is so disgusting to be surrounded by such wealth. But even then, I was in heaven. I've seen some of the greatest art in the world and some of it doesn't even come close to how gorgeous the clothes were. Moving along, we get to the Cartier store, and we're seated at an oak table with a crystal bowl filled with expensive, individually wrapped chocolate-covered coffee beans. I lean into my boyfriend and say, honey, are you embarrassed to be here with me? He looks perplexed and says, no, why? I do the shy eyes and speak out of the corner of my mouth. Well, I mean, here, shopping for engagement rings with another dude. Instantly my boyfriend started laughing. Of course, I'm fine. Oh thank go. Everyone here is freaking gay anyway. How do you know? Nobody except cocksuckers care about fine jewels. Not a jeweler, but I had a custom made ring that I designed and sketched personally for my ex. I talked with the jeweler on and off for about 3 months while I was paying for it and having it made. Since we broke up I haven't been there. I never returned it. I didn't want to see it again. As far as the jeweler knows, we're still together and engaged. After reading through some of these, I have to ask, why spend a bunch of money on a ring that a person might not like or even reject? Why not just discuss it and then go to the store together to pick out a ring you both like in terms of price and appearance? It just seems ridiculous to me to sink $2,000 or more into an item that may be rejected. Why don't people just bring this crap up and openly discuss it? Here's the thing about asking for someone's hand in marriage, the ring bought should be a surprise. The location, time and date of the question should be a surprise. The plane you hired to write her name in the sky should be a surprise. But both you and she should not be surprised by the answer. I asked my stepmom to give me a story from my dad, a retired jeweler. Your dad said he can only remember having to refund one engagement ring and did so after the 30-day limit for returns. The man had purchased the ring, took it home and a few weeks later showed it to his mother before giving to his girlfriend. His mother had a sad look on her face, got up and left the room. He thought she was upset that he wanted to get married, but instead, brought out a beautiful ring that had belonged to his grandmother that she had been saving for her son to give his girlfriend when he decided who he wanted to marry. It's not a humorous story, but a sweet love story. The man came back to your dad's jewelry store at Christmas and bought an even more expensive ring for his new bride's Christmas gift, and to thank your dad again for being kind enough to give him a refund even after the time limit was up. Worked at a jewelry counter years ago, had a guy buy a $25 cubic zirconia ring to propose to girlfriend. The next day I went to service to pick up the returns, and sure enough, there it was. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.